Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good break. I'm going to hand over to the amazing Sapphire now for a talk on the student lead experience. So really, really lucky to have her today to deliver this talk. So thank you very much, and I will hand over to you, Sapphire.
Thank you. That was a really nice introduction. So,
We are very lucky.
yeah, I'm really happy to be here and be sharing my experiences. It was also really cool to hear everyone's feedback from the breakout rooms, as you've kind of already started the conversation regarding some of the things I'm going to talk about. But yeah, if we could just go to the next slide, and I'll give a brief overview of my role. So, as I mentioned, I currently work as an award assessor, but I was previously a student lead working with my university for a year in that role, and I started that role in October 2022 and carried it out part-time alongside my master's degree. Within my role, my main responsibilities were, gathering student perspectives, insights on their experiences at the university, but we had quite a heavy focus on the culture at the university, wanting to understand what that was like from students' perspectives, because that's something that's really important and can affect student experience. So kind of understanding what students thought about the university's approach to student mental health and well-being, and whether it was clear that the university cared about their mental health and cared about their opinions and how that could feed into the work that they're doing and how effectively all of that is kind of communicated to students. So I'll get into how we kind of collected that information and those insights in the next couple of slides. But all of that information we put into the 2,000 word report. And as it's been mentioned, you do get support from Student Mind. So there's kind of a report outline that you can stick to, you don't have to, but we did, and we found that quite useful. So we highlighted 3 institutional strengths and 3 institutional challenges within our report. And then we also had the opportunity to, in our executive summary, maybe throw in some things that we couldn't fit into those 3 strengths or 3 challenges as well. And then you also had time or space to give like any extra additional comments at the end of the report as well. So you can work quite flexibly with the framework or not use it at all, but it was really helpful to have that support from Student Mind so it doesn't feel like you were kind of starting from scratch. We worked on the student-led submission independently from the university, even though they were supporting us. But that was really great because, yeah, it reinforced autonomy and independence and kind of a sort of freedom of speech of students to really share their experiences and feedback on their experiences at the university. And also made sure that we could be authentic to student voice in the report as well. So I'll just speak about what went well next. So something that was, I guess, different. I don't know if any other universities have done this, but I wasn't actually the only student lead at my university working on the report. I had a student co-lead, so there was 2 of us. And I think that was something that went really well because we were able to kind of bounce ideas off one another. In the case that one of the students wasn't able to commit to the work anymore, there would be another student who could continue that work. It was great when we were designing questions for focus groups, kind of just not having to do that by yourself and refine the questions together was something that was really helpful. And also being able to take advantage of our differing student experiences. So something that stood out to me, and I don't know if it's because I have like a research background, like inter-rater reliability. So even when we were looking at the data and putting the report together, maybe if I was analyzing it by myself, there's opportunity for bias and my own personal experiences at the institution to kind of influence how I might have been writing the report. But having 2 student co-leads have different experiences at the university, being able to go through the data, I think made sure that we were kind of able to look at everything objectively and make sure we were representing all of the students that were involved in our focus groups and our insight gathering, as well as those who weren't. So coming from a large institution where student experiences can vary across schools, and you find that across the sector, so it's not just our university. I think that was another thing that made having co-leads really good because we were from 2 schools that worked and operated really differently. So when we were coming up with questions for focus groups or trying to learn more about experiences, because we had such differing experiences, it meant we could really get into the depth of those questions. Yeah, so that was the first thing that I think went really well. The second thing that went really well, the work towards the student submission actually predated our roles as student leads. And I think this captures quite well the idea of kind of creating structures instead of leaving the work like to individuals. So there was kind of a plan before we came into our roles as student leads as well. And it was really clear what our responsibilities would be at different time posts leading up to the on-site visit. So across the year that we were working as student leads. And as an assessor, some insight that I've also gained is just how important it kind of is to be prepared to actually go for the award process. And that really came through in how they prepared us for our roles as student leads. So making sure that like staff who would be involved in the process really understood how the process worked. The fact that it was an opportunity for learning and improvement, that it wasn't punitive, that it was okay for the institution to not be perfect in all areas, meant that staff were really willing to support us, to offer up information, reports, and resources that really supported us in our roles. I think that was something that was really helpful. So we weren't going in blind, we were going in with people behind us supporting us who also understood the process. Which I guess leads me on to my next point. We had great support from the university. Oh, sorry, I'm still on I'm still on what went well. Yeah, we had great support from the university. So we had a student mental health and wellbeing team around us, and key members of staff who helped facilitate relationships with other members of staff that could help us with writing our report or at least accessing resources and information, and even groups of students that were also already doing similar work within their faculties, gathering student insights, not necessarily pertaining to student mental health and wellbeing, but we know in the whole university approach to student mental health and wellbeing, student experience, whatever it is, whatever the university is doing, actually plays into that. And then also on the very few occasions where there was perhaps conflicting views about student experience or maybe the way something was working in the university, having that team that were dedicated to the Charter Awards supporting us, they could kind of advocate for us and, you know, re-explain things, how the process works. And like I mentioned early, like it's okay for us to not be perfect and be open and transparent with those things. So it really helped having a team around us. So it wasn't just students, us as the co-leads kind of having to have those difficult conversations by ourselves with leadership, for example. I think the final thing that worked really well, myself and the other co-lead, though we'd worked with the student union in various roles, we weren't like sabbatical officers or anything, who often take on the roles of student leads, but we were provided with a sort of supervision from the student union, and that's kind of how we went through the report, made sure that everything made sense. We were kind of able to use them as a sounding board as well to make sure, like, is this things that you've come across working with students? Do you think we're communicating that clearly? Things like that. I think that was a really useful space to have that also allowed us to maintain a sense of autonomy and independence from the actual institution. So they didn't see our report until I guess it was finished. And even then, they didn't really have any pushback. But if they did, the student union were kind of there to support us with navigating those conversations if we did need it. So on to challenges. I think one of the main challenges that all student leads are likely to face is the amount of information that you have to go through. Universities are large institutions and the charter framework has a lot of themes in it, so it can seem quite overwhelming at first. But that's something that I think you can get through having necessary support from the university and also just having time to familiarize yourself with the charter framework and familiarize yourself with the data that you might be working with. I think the second challenge is I've called this balancing voices. So I think understanding the aims of the award process in like promoting dialogue and finding opportunities for improvement, having that understanding, like you can go into focus groups and students will see it as a space to like complain and just put forward all of their negative experiences, which are valid and we want to represent. But it's likely that the university is also doing good things. So it was, I guess, a bit of a struggle to remind students that we also want to like showcase what the university does well while making room to like highlight those areas for improvement. And even coming from a psychological background, there is just a tendency when you ask people for criticism or to critique something that they're going to focus on negatives more than positives. So that was a challenge that we did have because we'd have students maybe highlighting negatives that weren't consistent with data that we had from elsewhere or from other groups, for example. So yeah, just trying to look at all of the data and the information objectively, I think was a bit of a challenge and find that balance as well. And then I guess the final challenge, which has come up already, was engaging students. So when you kind of put out these spaces for students to give feedback, you tend to get the same kind of student, maybe volunteering their time to do it. And unlike sabbatical officers, we didn't really have an established relationship with any sort of groups of students. So we ended up kind of relying on our own social networks in some cases, but also using like media comms. And that posed the challenge because, again, it still kind of attracts the same kind of student when you go through the traditional ways of accessing different groups of students. Something that did really help was offering incentives. And I know it will really depend on the size of the university or what resources are available, whether you can do this. But paying students, you tend to find that different students are more likely to engage because not everyone is in the position to offer up their time freely, and it should be considered work if it can be. So I think that really helped. And we did actually get a broader range of perspectives when we were able to offer incentives for our students joining focus groups and participating in surveys as well. But even then, we did find that some marginalized groups still weren't captured in our focus groups. So we had to rely on secondary data as well. So that leads me on to the next bit on how did we actually ensure diversity and ensure that students were represented. I'm sure that the people here will know just how important it is to make sure that students are accurately represented in the report. If we're going to talk about change and improvements, we want to make sure that those improvements actually benefit all students at the university and truly reflect the needs and perspectives of the entire student body. So we did work with various existing student groups within the university and then also student media to engage different student communities and ensure that their voices were heard and included. So we organised focus groups. We conducted 2 in the end with 16 students. We wanted to keep them small enough that students could speak openly and in detail about their experiences. And we used a Jamboard, which meant that students could come back and kind of add anything that they missed in the focus groups. Focus group participants were incentivized for the participation. And we also there's a question. I'll come back to that at the end. And then we also selected students to reflect the diversity at the university. And then students who weren't selected to participate in focus groups were able to like submit their experiences or reflect on their experiences in a survey as well. So that added to some more of the primary data that we had access to. And then we also consulted student advisory groups. So something that I really admired at my university is they had this group of 100 students that reflected the student body at the university. And they had been working in student co-production and in different student voice mechanisms in other areas of the university. So you were able to call on them to ask them to participate in the focus groups, participate in the surveys. And then also in our final draft of the student report, we invited them to make comments and give feedback just to make sure that it was actually representative of their experiences as much as possible. And I think that was something that really helped as well. So we got as many students involved as possible, but also groups that were designed to be representative of the student body at the university. So just to go over some takeaways, or I guess summarize my experience as a student lead and what we did. Serving as a student co-lead in the self-assessment, it was both challenging and rewarding. But when I do reflect on it, I think about it a lot more positively because we were like so well supported. So I think you can really make a difference in the experience in how you support your student leads. And the award team at Student Minds was also really supportive. So even if you feel like as staff at your institution, you don't know how to support your student leads, Student Minds, I'm sure can help with that. So that was really helpful. Working with a co-lead brought diverse perspectives, and then engaging key stakeholders, including staff and student unions, also provided support. I think utilizing a range of different data, so both primary and secondary, really allowed us to get broad student perspectives over not only present, but you were able to see patterns over years at the university based on like different reports. And even though it was a lot of information, it was really helpful. Challenges included engaging a diverse range of students and managing vast amounts of information. If I was to highlight 2 key takeaways, I guess speaking to any student leads that are here, your focus should be authentic representation, but at the same time, I would say have a bit of grace with yourself to know that you can't, it's literally impossible to represent every single student at the university, especially in 2,000 words. So yeah, just focus on the main things and as much as possible, be authentic in your discussions and I guess critique of those areas. And then for those working with student leads, support and empower students in their pursuit of that open dialogue. I know it's an award process, so you might be thinking about how we can get the award, but like it's been said time and time again, it's about improvement, not necessarily getting the award, and reminding your student leads of that. I think as a student lead, you might feel pressured to show the university in the best light possible, but it's not about that. It's about showing your students' experiences as authentically as possible so that we can kind of facilitate change, positive change. And I guess by focusing on these takeaways, future student leads and staff can work together effectively to, facilitate that change. So yeah, I hope my talk was helpful in some way. And I'll be open to answering questions now or later. Now or later.
Sapphire, that was excellent. Thank you so much. And really just so insightful and so helpful. And yeah, I think I speak for everyone saying that that was just great to hear, and some really good like takeaways and advice there, and like highlighting those challenges as well, which I think were kind of um, echoed in some of the discussions that we're having earlier. So it was really, really helpful. Thank you for that. I think it would be great if you could address the question that was popped in the chat, because I think that was really specific to your experience, and then we can come back to the Q&A at the end and bring you in then, if that sounds all right. So there was a question in the chat that says, how many hours a week were you employed? Was it enough? And how long was the contract? Was that something that
I'm muted. I'm trying to remember because I don't want to just put the number out of thin air. I want to say, but I don't know if it's just the way that my university runs, like the way they pay students. I want to say that I was able to work up to 10 hours a week when I needed it.
Mm.
I never needed it. I feel like I worked maybe 2 hours a week on a normal week towards the role. And then maybe around busier periods, like when we were doing the focus groups, when we were like writing the actual report, I worked more hours. I don't think I ever used the full 10 hours in a week. And it was for a year. And then also you could like, maybe it wasn't 10 hours, but whatever it was, if I could like move my hours across different weeks so that it all balanced out.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I'm gonna actually answer that question and say, I don't know, I don't remember. It was enough and it didn't feel like too much. Like it never felt taxing or like it was too many hours. And it was a year. So even though my work with the team actually predated my role as a student lead, so as a student mental health and wellbeing intern before. And we were kind of preparing for the work towards the charter. It just so happened that we went on to be student leads, even though different students could have done it.
Mm.
Uh, but the actual role as a student lead was a year. So from October 2022 to October 2023.
Fantastic. Thank you. No, it's really, really helpful. Yeah, thank you, Sapphire. And we will come back. We'll have an opportunity for a Q&A at the end. So if you have questions, please do keep them in mind, note them down, and we will come back and have an opportunity to look at those questions at the end. We're going to go on just to talk now sort of about some best practice and top tips in a way to kind of summarize some. Oh, I'm going to stop the recording at the moment.